Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski, sitting here at Johns Hopkins looking at Dr. Joseph Losee. Hi, Joe.
Hi there.
Dr. Joseph Losee, MD, FACS, FAAP, and most recently, MBA, is a frequent flyer now on the Faculty Factory podcast. He was here last time, April 22 last year, episode number 222. It was all about resilience. You're going to want to check out that episode. If you love Dr. Joe Losee after this episode, or if you know him already, check it out. One of the quotes that everyone loved, I got some feedback on it, was, "It's not the load that will break you, it's the way you carry it." Joe talked about, we had a conversation about how academic medicine is a noble profession, and yet it's a heavy lift, it's a heavy load. It's tough, and we signed on for it, and we need to be resilient. So that was a great episode. I'll refer you back to that episode. But again, let's get back to Dr. Joe Losee. Who is he? He currently serves as a Dr. Ross H. Musgrave Endowed Chair of Pediatric Plastic Surgery, and he is the Executive Vice Chair of the Department of Plastic Surgery, and he's the Vice Dean for Faculty Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. So again, Joe, thanks so much for being here again. You recently debuted something super cool that I don't think anybody's doing, and so I'm excited to hear all about it.
Great. Thanks, Kim, for having me. It's we started an initiative about a year ago called the Pitt Scientist Wellbeing Initiative. And as you know, and all of our listeners know, physician burnout has gotten a tremendous amount of needed attention. And we know the magnitude of physician burnout. We understand the ramifications, the cost, and all of that. I mean, today you'd have to be living under a rock to not get the fact that physician burnout is a big deal. It's a public health crisis. Having said that, there are more faculty at medical schools than just clinical physicians. At Pitt, we have 2,500 faculty. 1,000 of them are non-clinical faculty, and that's mostly the scientists. There are some educators but even they are PhD scientists. So we recognize that those faculty suffer too, and they have burnout as well. So we really wanted to start an initiative that is focused on the well-being and the professional fulfillment of our Pitt scientists. So at the start of last academic year, it wasn't a heavy lift because we already had so much programming for physician well-being. Here at Pitt and UPMC, we have Physician Thrive, which is the physician well-being program. And so what I did is I just kind of pirated that program and made it for the non-clinical faculty. And what does that program include? Well, we started out by establishing a steering committee with a department champion. So we have 30 departments here, 8 basic science, and at Pitt we have a lot of PhD scientists in our clinical departments, like most medical schools do. So we have a Pitt scientist representative or a department champion that sits on a steering committee. We joined. Pitt and UPMC is already part, or UPMC is part of PWAC, and with the burnout survey from Stanford. So we purchased the non-clinical scientist version of the survey, of the burnout survey, and we administered that in the fall to our 1,000 Pitt scientists. And because we joined, that allowed PWAC to nationally benchmark this data. So now if you survey your non-clinical scientists, you will have benchmark data nationally. And so we did that. We have started, and in June, we have our inaugural Pitt Scientist Wellbeing Symposium with a keynote speaker and workshops and executive panels, and then a reception. And we included, so we've talked, I think, before about our peer coach program, our physician peer coach program. We've trained over at Pitt and UPMC, we've trained over 100 physician peer coaches that work with our medical students, our residents, and our faculty. So we put a cohort together of Pitt scientists and put them through the training program. So now we have Pitt scientist peer coaches that are part of our coaching team. And it has been incredibly well received. I think maybe this was just a local thing, but my guess would be that many non-clinical science faculty at all of our institutions don't feel the attention that we give the physicians. At least that was the case for us. I just don't think that the non-clinical faculty have felt the love. In burnout's a good example, right? I mean, a lot of the program development, a lot of things are clinically, it's focused on our clinical faculty. So anyways, this was incredibly well received by our Pitt scientists who really felt, and I've taught many cohorts of physician peer coaches, and I'll tell you, the scientist peer coach training program, I felt they were more in-tuned, receptive, and certainly appreciative of what we do, because they felt like they were getting, some long needed attention. So we've tried to do some literature searches to see, like, is anybody else doing anything like this? And I'm not sure. We haven't been able to find. I mean, I'm sure there are, and we just don't know about it. But I haven't been able to find any academic medical center who's had a targeted, focused, intentional program aimed at the non-clinical faculty to support their professional well-being and to fight burnout in that group. So it's like one of the things I'm most excited about recently. And our non-clinical faculty are incredibly appreciative.
Wow, congrats, Joe. I too am unaware of any systematic formalized program, and you're right. Exactly the same situation we're seeing here at Hopkins is that when we talk about in the School of Medicine faculty, inevitably many of our policies, programs, and resources are directed to the clinician faculty. And then it's always seems to be like an afterthought, like a comma, semicolon, and non-clinical faculty too. And so it's one thing to have programs or talk to faculty who are in those basic science departments, but because they sometimes feel like they're isolated as it is. But you talk about basic scientists who are embedded in clinical departments, and they're even further removed and feel further isolated. That's kind of almost like three groups. So you got your clinicians, you got your non-clinicians in the basic science departments in the lab, then you got your non-clinician scientists in the clinical departments, and that third group oftentimes feel like, well, geez, at least y'all in molecular and comparative pathomicrobiology, you have each other. I'm an N of one, very deep in this department or division, and I'm a total unicorn here. I don't feel like I can fit in with talking about RVUs and seeing patients. I'm not doing that kind of work. And so there's sometimes this kind of conflict of, oh, it must be nice to be you, PhD, and not having to do thus and such and thus and such. And then the PhDs feel like, well, yeah, it's nice being me. If you want to think about it that way, if I don't get funding, I don't have a job. You can always be a clinician and go into private practice and see patients, right? If I don't have this, so there's always this kind of, not that it's an outright, aggressive stance, but there's that undertone of, who am I? Do I belong here? Where do I fit in? So I love that you're finally surfacing that that tension sometimes.
Yeah. And another practical thing is orientation. Like when you're a physician faculty and you come to many of our schools, it's a huge, it's a big orientation because, there's a lot of stuff that you got to get underway to be a clinician. But, do you have a real robust orientation program for the non-clinical faculty? They're usually relegated to the university's orientation, but not to the school. So I just think that, well, we found a lot of positive feedback in the last academic year on focusing attention on the non-clinical faculty who have the same, and different needs and issues with professional fulfillment and burnout as well. So it's been, I'm just happy to share it because it's really been a rewarding initiative.
Yeah. And so tell us, Joe, how does this, you get in kind of I get in these kind of philosophical conversations with myself and with my colleagues. Like, who cares? Like, why does this matter? Like, why can't, let me put on my, the bad guy kind of hat here. Just suck it up. Just do it. Like, why do we have to invest these resources in programs like this? Why does it matter? And why does it matter specifically for our PhD non-clinician scientists? Who does it help other than the obvious? Well, it's obviously going to make them feel like the institution values them, but what are some tangible results that we can measure or see from creating these kinds of programs?
Well, so there on the physician well-being side, right, that we know, and there's a lot of great data and research that demonstrates what happens when physicians are burned out. And we know that there are ramifications on the clinical side, the professional side, and the personal side, right? So on the professional side, we know that if you're a physician that's burned out, your chance that your patients will not take your recommendations, that you will have increased medical errors. Your chance of leaving the institution are high, and we know the replacement of an academic physician is about $900,000 a year. And we know that productivity is decreased. And for all of those reasons, the institution wants professionally fulfilled docs. On the personal side, alcoholism and broken relationships and depression leads to increased suicide. And one physician dies by suicide every 3 days in America. So that's, if you do the math, one graduating medical school class a year. So we know that there are bad things associated with physician burnout. And we're just, again, I don't think there's much literature at all about scientists in medical schools and the impact of their burnout. Certainly, if you're like Pitt and Hopkins, who are high in the rankings of NIH funding, we want productive scientists who are professionally fulfilled and productive. So, I mean, just for those reasons, if you're a research-heavy institution, then you want successful scientists. That's just the way it is. And I mean, we have 1,000 of these faculty. That's 1,000 faculty and 1,000 families and lives, and we want them to be professionally fulfilled. So we're identifying some of the things, and so part of our well-being and burnout survey, we identified some of the hot spots. So we're having listening lunches. I just got back from one where we meet with all these faculty and listen to the things that they need, help with. And it's nothing new. That I'm sure these are the same exact things that you guys have at Hopkins, like childcare, parking, some of the things that physicians
Essentials.
complain
Basic.
about, and
Yeah.
they get, like our physicians just have better parking than our scientists do. It's those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And so I just think it's, these are our faculty. This is our professional work family, and they need to, they, they deserve to be fulfilled, and it'll only help us and their colleagues as well. So.
Thank you so much. I love this so much. And it just, again, another endorsement of our valuing faculty in its fullest diversity, in its broadest spectrum. All faculty matter. And we can't risk alienating certain groups at the expense of others. So I think it's so important that you've, raised and elevated this issue that of this kind of a neglected group of faculty members. And I would love to learn more about, can you tell us a little bit more about the program and what you do in the Pitt Scientist Wellbeing Initiative, like the content of some of these courses? And I'm sure faculty, anybody listening can reach out to you to learn more, and we'll give your email address at the end here. But I'm always a proponent of, when we put together programs at Hopkins, I'm like, all right, Kim, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. The mere effort of convening people together is most of the work, because you have a room of people looking around going, oh, I'm not alone. There are people who are articulating the same concerns I have. Yes, I'm worried about a gap in my funding. Yes, I'm worried about employing the scientists and the research assistants in my lab. And oh my gosh, I'm not going to get scored, or it's going to be bad. Yes, papers. How can I be getting papers when I'm busy writing grants? And oh my gosh, someone else feels the same way. So can you tell us a little bit about what happens other than convening all these people so that they can see each other? What is the content?
Yeah, so I mean, one is we wanted to get the pulse of our scientists and their levels of burnout and professional fulfillment. So, one, diagnosing the magnitude of our issue here, and then with our monthly champions meeting, we're understanding what's going on, and why some departments are doing better than others, and best practices and hot spots. Our symposium, again, we have a keynote speaker, and we'll have an executive panel and a lot of networking. We are looking into, like I said, we have these listening lunches, and then we are identifying some of the areas where we can then do programming to help alleviate some of the burnout. So we're still in the exploration phase and figuring out what we can do here, what low-hanging fruit we can address and make things better.
Okay. So the symposium is the debut event.
We're going to go over the results of our well-being survey there. We have a keynote speaker, and so that is sort of our first school-wide event in this regard. And in coaching, we all know that listening can be therapeutic, and just the fact that we are letting our HIT scientists, non-clinical faculty, know that, one, they matter to us, we care about them, and we're listening to what are the things that are troubling them, and making an honest effort to try to help. I think that goes a long way. That's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. The listening and learning is, as long as we follow up with something.
Yeah.
One of my frustrations is when you do these listening and learning tours and focus groups, and I've done so many over the 20 years I've been doing this. And then you think, well, you hear from faculty, what's the point of doing that survey or doing that focus group or going to a town hall? Nothing ever happens. So minimally, I think our responsibility is a communication feedback of, hey, this is what happened. We gathered, this many of people were here. We heard this. You said that. Here's the next step. And closing loops and following up. So that builds the trust the confidence and the honesty of someone, that builds the trust that, oh, Dr. Losee, this thing is real. This thing is happening. And then you build that momentum when people see this is not just lip service. So I can't wait to hear the uptake of this and the outcomes of it. I'm sure it's going to spin off lots and lots of enthusiasm and building leadership and growing a bench of people who are like, oh, I want to be a part of this, not only to contribute, but I want to be involved in it. Can I help organize, facilitate, raise awareness, communicate? That these kinds of good news things do nothing but, I think, raise all ships. So I'm excited for you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So one last question though, maybe going back, you talked about how you convene these department directors. How much of a lift was that, and who's funding this? And did they all, when you invited people to talk about this, did they get it? Did you get a little bit of pushback? Was it only the basic science department chairs? And then is your department funding the symposium and the speaker, or the provost? Who supports this?
Yeah. So we went. I identified one of the. So our Office of Faculty Affairs has 4 associate deans and a vice and an assistant dean in addition to me. And so the assistant dean is sort of his passion project. And so we went to each of the departments, each of the basic science departments, and we presented this initiative. And I asked for them to identify a champion that would work with us on a steering committee. And that was a relatively easy thing. Our Office of Faculty Affairs is funding the symposium, is funding the training, the coach training. So the funding does come from our Office of Faculty Affairs.
That's great. So folks, you got another lesson from Dr. Joe Losee here on how to start an initiative like this. And it begins with getting champions. So you just heard that, not only a pitch to going and presenting the idea, but then the ask is a champion. So that's how you build up that stakeholder involvement and engagement. And then people see the opportunity for leadership to step up, to get involved, and future scholarship around this, and growing the movement. So that's super exciting, Joe. I love it.
Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to visit again.
Yeah, anytime. We have to talk about our mutual interest in conflict mediation. Maybe we can get you doing another little snippet on that. But folks, Dr. Joe Losee at Pitt, love Pitt, and you can get in touch with Dr. Losee at, here's his name, Joseph.Losee, Losee, at chp.edu. Again, Joseph.Losee, Losee, at chp.edu. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you, Kim.
Hello there, Faculty Factory podcast listeners. It's your podcast producer, Casey Callanan. Just wanted to let you know that as of May 1st, 2024, this podcast has had more than 93,000 total downloads and YouTube views from listeners in 98 different countries. And the Faculty Factory website, facultyfactory.org, has drawn nearly 45,000 web visits from users in 122 different countries. This is an international platform, and we want to invite you to be a guest on our show. So we just want to hear from different faculty around the world, and this is our play to you. Please reach out if you'd like to be a guest or to nominate someone in our academic medicine community that you think we need to hear from. Visit the Contact Us page on facultyfactory.org to send us a message, or contact Dr. Skorupski directly at kskorupski@jhmi.edu.
Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more. Get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.